This is breaking news from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, sponsored by Michael Gaughan's South Point Hotel, Casino, and Spa.
Will help give a significant leg up to us in our opioid fight against this epidemic. Today, I'm pleased to announce that Nevada will be receiving over $285 million from various sources to help address the damages caused by the opioid epidemic. As you are all well aware, Nevada is one of the hardest hit states by this epidemic, and this money will help the state mitigate the harm that has been done to our residents. Between January of 2019 and October of 2021, 1,300 Nevadans died from opioids. That number does not include overdoses and emergency room visits. Regardless, that number is too high. In fact, one death is too high. The funding comes from three distinct sources, and we will begin with the largest single source. Today, I'm proud to announce that Nevada will, in fact, join the $26 billion settlement with the three largest opioid distributors, those being AmerisourceBergen, Cardinal Health, and McKesson. After multiple new developments, I ultimately decided that it was in Nevada's best interest to join this settlement. These developments include court decisions in other states. We've monitored those and have reassessed our case here. But in addition to that, we've also looked at the severity of the opioid epidemic and the overturning of the Purdue bankruptcy confirmation order, which means that money due Nevada from the bankruptcy is going to be delayed. Each of these developments led us to consider this as our best course of action. This settlement with the three major opioid distributors holds them accountable through both monetary payment and strict injunctive terms for their actions in creating and fueling the opioid epidemic. These injunctive terms are very strong, and they include, among other things, requiring these three companies to establish a centralized, independent clearinghouse to provide both themselves and state regulators with aggregated data and analytics about where opioids are going and how often, and using data-driven systems to detect suspicious opioid orders from pharmacies. The distributor settlement will result in $26 billion nationwide that will be available for the opioid crisis remediation. The funding will be distributed among participating states according to a formulation by the states that considers the extent of the harm within the population of the states. Money within Nevada will be distributed through the One Nevada Agreement. You all have covered that in the past, and that's something that I'm very proud of my office being able to work out with our municipalities. The total amount that the state will receive through these settlements comes out to around $231.7 million. We expect to receive the first payment in April, followed by a second payment in July. Following these first two payments, each payment will be made in July over a 17-year period. With this money, the state of Nevada can immediately continue funding the abatement program set forth in Senate Bill 390, and Nevada cities and counties can receive immediate funds to begin their abatement programs. The sooner we receive this funding, the sooner we can start using it to save lives in our state. The second source of money comes from a different settlement that Nevada will undertake with Johnson & Johnson and its US-based Janssen pharmaceutical companies. Under this settlement, through the One Nevada Agreement, Nevada will receive around $53.5 million, the vast majority of which will be payable by the end of this year. That's a much faster time frame than most of the settlements between other states and Johnson & Johnson, many of which are payable over a period of 9 years. We will receive our money sooner, which can help us at an even quicker rate. Johnson & Johnson will also be required to stop selling opioids. They'll be required to refrain from funding or providing grants to third parties for opioid production. They can't lobby on activities related to opioids, and they must share clinical trial data under the Yale University Open Data Access Project. I made a commitment to Nevada families when I filed the new expanded lawsuit when I first entered this office. And that commitment was that I would not rest until every conspirator who preyed on the people of Nevada, that every company that sold this poison for profit was brought to justice. I made a promise that I would not settle for anything less than the best deal for our state. And today I'm discussing and introducing the best deal for our state. I can tell you that this is the best deal for our state for these defendants. Nevada will get more money, we'll get it faster because of the settlements we have entered into, and we can start doing the work to heal our state from this epidemic. After I expanded the lawsuit, we named over 60 defendants. As of today, we've settled with several parties, including those that I've discussed, as well as the McKinsey Corporation. With those settlements, Nevada will now receive more than $330 million, with more than 1/3 of that funding coming to our state by the end of this year. We still have a long way to go in this lawsuit. We have numerous claims against many other defendants still remaining, including other manufacturers and pharmacy defendants. Lastly, I'm proud to announce that Nevada has received a $5.75 million grant from the Department of Justice for the Comprehensive Opioid, Stimulant, and Substance Abuse Site-Based Program. This is a collaboration between the Nevada Attorney General's Office, the State Department of Health and Human Services, Northern Regional Behavioral Health Coordinator, and 7 subaward sites. The funding will be used primarily in rural and frontier Nevada to either establish or expand the mobile outreach safety teams, the MOST teams, and forensic assessment services triage teams, the FAST teams. MOST serves as a jail and hospital diversion program, while FAST provides assessment and case management for high-risk individuals and those with mental health and other disorders. The funding will also be used by the county's community coalitions to continue naloxone distribution and drug take-back days. Further details on the grant subaward sites will be shared after the press conference today. The truth of the matter is this: no amount of money will bring back those lost to us because of the opioid crisis. Thousands of Nevadans who have lost a family member, a friend, or neighbor understand this all too well. But this funding, whether it be from a settlement or a federal grant, will help save lives. Every time a Nevadan suffering from opioid use disorder doesn't have to wait for a bed at a treatment facility, or a family member can call a community service provider for help, or a person in the midst of a mental health crisis is sent to the hospital rather than jail, that is one more family that we can help heal. Another life we have the opportunity to save before it's too late. And another path to rebuilding our state and its healthcare and criminal justice systems. I'm proud of the work of this office, the work we've done in obtaining this funding. And I know that these funds will be used to help those hurting most in our state. Thank you for joining us today.
Great, thank you all. I think we're having some issues with video, but I should have a recording of that I will send to TV stations that do need it. Apologies on our end. But I'd like to open it up for some questions now. If anyone wants to use the raise hand feature, I can call on you as those come in. Okay, Riley Snyder with the Independent has it.
My apologies. Oh, go ahead, John.
No, I'm sorry. Riley had raised his hand for a question. Riley, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Great. Can you hear me, John and Attorney General Ford?
I can. Hi, Riley. Congratulations on the nuptials and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. You talked about this a little bit in your remarks, Attorney General, but is there any more information or kind of explanation you can give as to why you decided to go back into the multi-state $26 billion settlement? Was it largely related to the Purdue pharmacy, as you mentioned in your remarks? Was there anything else that made you decide to join that settlement and not have Nevada pursue its own attempted settlement with the drug companies?
Yeah, Riley, great question. And you've touched on one of the items that helped to persuade us to pursue this settlement at the end of the day. And it was one of those was, in fact, the Purdue Pharma bankruptcy. We were counting on those funds to come in a little sooner. And because of the overturning of that bankruptcy or the appeal of that bankruptcy and that decision, those funds are going to be delayed at some point. So at some level. And so we did look at that in considering this issue. But we've also looked at the current posture of other sister litigation, other sister state litigation. Several claims that Nevada has asserted against the distributor defendants, will be affected by what we've seen happen in other states. And on the other hand, a number of our claims against defendant manufacturers and retail pharmacies are now stronger. And so what we want to do is to bring in funds quicker so that we can help focus those monies on helping people in our state. We also want to focus on the stronger claims that we have, again, while immediately bringing money into the state for the much needed opioid remediation. And the last thing I'll say is, pursuing a conversation with Johnson & Johnson has allowed us to shorten the time frame for receiving money from 9 years to this year. And again, my promise was to do all that I could to receive the best result for this state to address the opioid epidemic. And I think all of those factors combined led us to determine that this is the best approach going forward.
Great. I think Sam Metz with the AP was next. Go ahead, Sam.
Attorney General, thank you for taking my question. You just did a rural tour. Can you talk a little bit more about your conversations with rural officials and what kind of remediation One Nevada will be used towards?
Hey, Sam, good to hear your voice. Great to see you recently around the Nevada Day Parade, and thanks so much for coming out and talk to us about what we're doing in the office. To your question about the rural tour, absolutely happy to share with you some of the conversations that we had in the several jurisdictions. As a reminder, we spent an entire week almost, traveled over 1,000 miles talking to people in rural Nevada, constituents, elected officials, and otherwise. And some of the similar conversations revolved around the opioid epidemic and revolved around our state's ability to enter into a One Nevada agreement that is going to help divvy up funds that the state receives among municipalities as well. And so we have corresponded with our municipalities about this plan. We believe we have great buy-in from those municipalities, and they too are quite interested in bringing in as much as possible, as soon as possible, to help address and remediate some of the effects of the opioid epidemic.
Great. Do we have any further questions? Riley, I lowered your hand in there. I didn't know if I did that, if you had another question or not.
I raised my hand. I had another question. Attorney General, you mentioned that the state still has numerous claims against other defendants, including other manufacturers and pharmacies. Can you just briefly detail which companies the state is still involved in negotiations with?
Well, I can't answer that question directly to you, Riley, because the negotiations themselves are not things that we want to talk about out loud just yet. But there are several defendants that you can look at the complaint and see who remains in the lawsuit, whether it's Teva, whether it's Enzo. I believe Enzo is one of the names. There are several other agencies and entities that are engaged in this lawsuit that we will continue to pursue. Not only conversations around settlement, but also litigation. We're deep in the throes of discovery right now, and our case is very strong, as I've indicated, against pharmacies and against manufacturers. I have on the line with me my colleague, Mark KRUEGER, who is the chief of my Bureau of Consumer Protection. I don't want to put him on the spot, but if he wants to offer anything in addition, I'd be happy to tender the mic to him.
Thank you, Attorney General. This is Mark KRUEGER. Riley, thanks for your question. In addition to what General Ford said, I would recommend that you go onto our website where we have the second amended complaint, and you can see all of the original 61 defendants that are listed there. And then you can see how many are left that we're still litigating against.
Great. Thank you, Riley, for the question. Is there anyone else with a question?
All right, I guess it's me again. Thank you for the answers, Attorney General and Mark. Appreciate that. I also wanted to ask. I remember back, I think in 2018, when your office was announcing that it was pursuing this litigation against the opioid companies. It had entered into a contract with, I believe it was the Eaglet Prince law firm to handle some of the contingency or some of the legal work on this. Are they involved with these settlements? Are they receiving any portion of the state share? Or is that separate from the 285 million that you mentioned?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Riley. It's Eaglet Adams now. And let me, before I answer the question, remind you, Riley, and everyone else on the screen, that I, as Attorney General, completely recused myself from the selection of outside counsel. Had no involvement with the selection process. It was a large panel that reviewed all of the applicants that came in, and they made a determination on their own who we would be using as outside counsel. And so I wanted to state it out loud because I don't want any misunderstandings around how this came about. That said, let me speak directly to your question. Under the One Nevada agreement and the contract that the state has with outside counsel, contingency fees, costs, and other potential federal claims are paid before fees for outside counsel are to be determined. The state contract states that contingency fee counsel will receive 19%, a mere 19% in fees for these recoveries. However, because of an order entered into by the NBL judge in Ohio concerning these settlements, the local government's fees for outside contingency fee counsel will be capped at 15%. So those are the amounts that will be subjected to contingency fee outside counsel. But again, that's after other potential federal claims and costs are paid before we even get to a calculation of that.
Great. I think Sam had raised his hand again. Sam, do you have another question?
Yeah, I wanted to give Riley a break. So Alabama, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Washington, and West Virginia also rejected the terms of the $26 billion settlement in August. Do you know if they're taking similar action in light of the Purdue bankruptcy terms that compelled you, Attorney General Ford?
Sam, listen, I appreciate the question, and I'm sure you had to ask it, but you probably can understand that I won't be speaking on behalf of any of those states relative to what their plans may be. I would suggest that you contact their offices directly or monitor their local media to see what, if anything, they'll be doing relative to this issue.
Thank you.
Riley, I see your hand still up. Did you have one more, or is that from the last question?
Sorry, no, that was the last question. And thank you for all the answers. Appreciate it.
Okay. Does anybody else have any further questions for the AG? All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Let me see what I can figure out with this video, and I apologize for the technical difficulties.
You've been watching breaking news from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, sponsored by Michael Gaughan's South Point Hotel, Casino, and Spa.